E te mana whakawa.
Ko Nuk Korako, tēnā koe.
A tēnā koe anō e te mana whakawa. Huri no te whare nei, e mihi atu kia koutou katoa. Mr Speaker, it's indeed my pleasure to be able to stand in the first reading for the Ngāti Tamaoho Treaty Settlement Bill. And I want to thank the previous Speaker, the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta, for giving us a very good overview of the rohe, the takiwā actually of Ngāti Tamaoho. And it takes me back actually when I was at Tipene, because we used to actually have a number of representatives from Ngāti Tamaoho actually come, particularly during the times of celebration at the school, but also during the kapahaka. We had a great concert party, kapahaka group actually, and because a number of the waiata actually, or the items actually came from that particular area. So I want to acknowledge that. Sir, acknowledgements also, I think, are really important, particularly as has been done previously around those that have passed on into the long night, who were very, very serious sort of players on taking this on the journey to where it is today. So I acknowledge those who have actually passed on. Also, those who have worked tirelessly and continue to do so. And they were acknowledged by the Minister and the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta. Sir, I think the important thing too is to acknowledge the Minister for Treaty of Waitangi Negotiations, the Honourable Christopher Finlayson, particularly for his work in this particular piece of legislation, because as we know in Tāmaki Makaurau and also right across there, there are a number of iwi, sir, that make up a lot of that sort of in those areas. And it's important that we actually address the claims, the concerns as we move through, so that there is a kotahitanga, kotahitaka thing going on, particularly to include everyone. Mr Speaker, the treaty settlements process, again, and we've talked many times about this, is that it is indeed a healing process. And this is no exception, this particular treaty settlement. So, when we look at the restoring of the partnership between iwi and the Crown, and particularly that was promised as far back in 1840 under the treaty. And so it's about providing iwi with an opportunity to look forward, to plan for the future, as we all know. And that is really very much the essence of this particular treaty settlement as well. But before all of that can happen, as we also know, it's important that there is a meaningful acknowledgement of the wrongdoings of the past, in the past. So in this case, sir, Ngāti Tamaoho, the wrongs committed by the Crown were very, very many, and sir, unfortunately the consequences were devastating. And so when we look at Ngāti Tamaoho, by all accounts, sir, this was an iwi that actually welcomed the opportunity to form a relationship with Pākehā settlers and also with the Crown. They, sir, welcomed the economic opportunities of trade and even land transactions. But little could they have anticipated that the way these opportunities would be undermined by the Crown's bad faith dealings. And this was highlighted by the speech from the Minister. So the Crown retained land which it had never purchased and failed to reserve the tents that it actually had committed to. Ngāti Tamaoho, sir, saw benefit and loyalty to the Crown, even while sharing their aspirations for the kingitanga as well. And I think that's a really important sort of part of this, sir. They were actually trying to actually deliver a partnership with the colonial settlers, and also, sir, a partnership which is also not only was it a physical partnership, but it was also one about whakapapa. And it was also one about ancestry as well, deeply inground into the ethos of these people, of this iwi, sir, Ngāti Tamaoho. So, while the Crown's actions gave iwi every reason to be distrustful and to rebel against a regime which demanded both their loyalty and their land, Ngāti Tamaoho, in their passiveness, did not rebel. They did not rebel. And, sir, their loyalty to the Crown was rewarded by Crown troops with the inaccurate labelling of their people, Ngāti Tamaoho, as rebels. They were actually labelled or branded as rebels, resulting, sir, in the eviction and the confiscation of most of their land. Sir, when we look at the title to the little remaining land that was gifted, there was some land that was gifted to individual Ngāti Tamaoho, who the Crown considered to be loyal, but very, very few. And the land, sir, was alienated, actually, from iwi ownership. It was just individual ownership, not iwi ownership. And that went against also a lot of the ethos, sir, about how Māori actually look at land. It's actually about a collectivisation as opposed to an individual right. Sir, this is now a landless iwi. Watched as, and when they looked, taking that on board, they watched, sir, as Pākehā settled their lands, changed their traditional environment beyond recognition, and adversely affected their traditional resources. You only have to travel across the Bombay Hills, through, sir, into South Auckland, into that area, and you can see that huge transformation, how economically viable it is. But this was originally land that was owned by this particular iwi, Ngāti Tamaoho. Sir, the redress provided in this deed of settlement seeks to provide some reparation for the harm that was caused, but it cannot and will not compensate Ngāti Tamaoho for the vast amounts of this land that I've just described, and also the economic potential that this land had actually given. And, sir, they find themselves today, as I said, as landless, but also bereaved, actually, of the commercialisation, sir, that they could have benefited from. So what the commercial redress here does, sir, however, it provides an economic base for future development. It provides an opportunity, sir, for the iwi to actually be in charge of their own destiny. It provides, in some ways, too, their right of tino rakatirataka and their right, sir, to stand finally on their land, on their whenua, and also to utilise it, to develop it for their economic well-being as well as their cultural well-being, but particularly the most important part of that is that it's about their identity. It's about their identity. Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Māori Affairs Select Committee, we really do look forward to considering the settlement and this bill in a lot more detail, to actually assist as the kaitiaki to actually help this bill through on its journey through to the Royal Ascension. Should the election results, though, sir, and consequent appointments permit, I look forward to welcoming the rakatira of Ngāti Tamaoho and all who would submit on this bill when they appear before the Māori Affairs Select Committee, and I look forward to seeing the passing of this bill and the completion of the settlement process for Ngāti Tamaoho. I finally want to say to them, because I know there'll be a lot of them actually watching this in cyberspace, on television, but it is indeed with great honour that all of us here today, and particularly those members of the Māori Affairs Select Committee, really do tautoko this bill and also wish them well on its journey through to Royal Assent after the third reading. On that note, sir, I commend this bill to the House. Nō reira, huri noa te whare nei e mihi atu kia koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe te